Ok.
Antonella Sasso, no, io live, quindi adesso live.
Voi non vedete nulla?
Qua mi dice che ci sono 9 persone che mi
Sì,
ok.
eccoti qua, adesso sì, ti si vede.
Ok.
Ah, ecco.
Allora, ok. Hello everybody. I don't know if just a second, mi conviene, dovreste spegnere o togliere l'audio. I'm sorry, I was just telling people to eliminate the audio because here there's an echo if you keep your cell phones on. Now, today I've had a little bit of a problem with the connection, so I'm sorry if I'm late, but essentially I have even a bigger problem because I'm currently connecting with a laptop and I was unable to connect with my iPhone, which means I'm not sure yet how to show you how I'm painting. Now, ideally, you definitely see me, but I don't know if I put this down, if you can see me, maybe, but it's kind of hard. Corinne. Now I'm just asking for help.
Lo mettiamo là sopra.
Yes, somebody's right now helping me to move the screen so that you can see me paint.
Ok.
Hello from Bucharest, hello from Phoenix, Brenda and Florentina. Hi. Così?
Chiedi se lo vedono.
No, mi vedo io, quindi vedo quello che vedono. Ok. So just give me 2 minutes. I will be adjusting this laptop so that you can all see me. Allora, lo mettiamo così.
Ma qua come lo facciamo? Si fa
Non
collegare un telefono?
We're just checking how to do this.
Non ho idea.
Mettiamo una scatola o qualcosa.
Sì, intanto te lo reggo e tu parla.
Okay, so first things first. So somebody is actually helping me with the screen here. I think this is the craziest YouTube video you've ever seen with somebody helping me out this way. So I'm just laughing at where's my leaf? My leaf has disappeared. Okay, so we have decided to paint this leaf, which is called in Latin Viburnum tinus lucidum. And this is a shrub I have found today in the street, and I've decided to paint this one simply because I find it rather interesting. I like the idea that it's faded, it has retained some of the green, which I'm not sure you can actually see because it's pretty yellow on screen. And I like it because it's got all these red spots. Okay, so apparently they have found a way to fix my screen so I can actually see you down here, and I'm going to start painting right now. Now, I'm not sure whether you're familiar with watercolor or not, but we are going to work both with wet on wet as well as with wet on dry. All good? All good. Okay, so if there are any questions, you just type them in the comments, and every so often I will just be checking the comments. Now, first of all, if you have never drawn or if you've never used watercolor before, you have to know that the drawing needs to be made rather simple, and everything else will be done directly with paint. When I say rather simple, that means that we're just working with the contour of the leaf. So, first things first, I'm going to roughly draw my leaf. When I say roughly, that means this has a simple shape, which I'm not sure you can see. Okay. Now my assistants will tell me here if everything is going to go well or not. Okay, poi me lo dite voi se non va bene. Okay, so having said this, right now I'm using a HB pencil so that you can see where I'm going to place the water. But if you have to draw, when you're doing botanicals, it's important to use an F pencil because we don't want the image to be too dark. Because once the water hits the paper, it will be impossible to delete the lines. Okay, now working wet in wet. C'è qualcuno che mi presta un pennello più grande di questo? Now, when we're working wet and wet, the first thing we need to do is wet all the area and just let the water seep through. Grazie. Seep through. Troppo grande. Seep through the paper. I'm just asking for brushes because here I have four wonderful ladies helping me out. Oh, okay. So I'm using, now here's my palette, and you can actually see the variety of colors I have, but for this leaf you only need 3 or 4 colors. So the first thing I'm doing is I'm preparing some cadmium yellow, and just going to place my cadmium yellow all over the leaf. Very watery, very juicy watercolor. I hope you can see clearly. If you can't, just write it in the comments and somebody will be telling me whether I need to make some adjustments or not. So the first wash, we call it a wash when we apply watercolor all over. The first wash is just a simple color. I mean, just a simple glaze of cadmium yellow. And then what we need to do before applying other layers is just to wait a little bit till the water seeps through. So right now, as you can see, as I move the paper, you will see that it is shiny. I can see it's pretty shiny, which means there is too much water on the paper. And if there is too much water, I couldn't or I cannot really add more pigment, because if I do this right now, the pigment will be dissolved or it won't be as intense as I want it to be. So right now on this side, I'm not sure you can see it, but on this side, it has lost a little bit of the sheen. And in this case, it means I can move on to add some layers. Now, because this leaf is has some spots, but these are not really defined spots. We have some reddish, brownish, and greenish spots here and there. What I'm going to do is add with my paintbrush some reddish. Right now, I'm using some cadmium yellow. So I am just dabbing as I deem interesting, which means I'm not following exactly the leaf. I'm just following more or less the feeling of some of these marks or some of these reddish, I couldn't really call them marks, but reddish things. Okay. So I'm adding some brown here and there in some of the spots. And I'm letting the water do the job, which means I am currently just playing around with the water and dabbing some color here and there. And I'm just layering everything because I didn't like the way the water was spreading. So I'm just moving the whole thing around. I really don't want too much of the red to show up. Now, another thing, I have a spray bottle. It's just containing water, and I'm going to spray my palette to reactivate all my colors. And I'm going to take some of the rose madder. I think it's a rose madder, or maybe it's a alizarin crimson. I'm not sure because I can't read it, but it looks like an alizarin crimson. And I'm going to dab some spots here and there. As you can see from the leaf, we do have red spots in certain places. So Again, I dab, dab, dab here and there, and maybe I add some more. In this case, I'm taking some cadmium red. So I'm intensifying these reds, and I'm doing this at will. That is, I'm not exactly following what I see here. I just follow what I like. Okay. Now, as you notice, I'm not working on this side here simply because I can see that there isn't enough water. And if there isn't enough water, that means that the water will not spread and I will not have this beautiful effect we see up here. So I'm adding again cadmium yellow, and I'm applying my cadmium yellow all over just to dampen the paper, and so that I can have this effect all over. And again, at will, I'm just adding or dabbing some of this reddish. This is cadmium red, by the way. And here I have both cadmium red and alizarin crimson. Now, it's time for the darks. I need to put some darks, and later on we'll put some greens. Now I'm actually mixing a little bit of cadmium yellow and a little bit of alizarin. And I get this beautiful orange you see on the palette here. Let me show you better. So I'm getting this more intense color, which I'm going to add in a couple of places. Maybe down here. And I'm going to spread it so that I don't get a definite line. I don't really want a very crisp line, but I want it to be kind of faded. Okay. This looks good. And maybe in some areas, in some spots, I want to add this color. Sometimes what happens is I don't like the way the color is spreading. Like I don't like it right here. So what I would do is just go over with a paintbrush and mix again as I like it. It's always your choice. Now at this point, what I need to do is I cannot layer the color when everything is still wet. So right now it's wet in wet. So what I'm going to do is in 2 or 3 seconds, I'm going to use the hair dryer. So you're going to be hearing a deafening noise. So just bear with me just 30 seconds, and I'm going to use the hair dryer. You can't see it, but if I tilt it against the light, you will see that there is no water on the surface. And so this is a stage where I can layer on top something else, which means right now I can layer a green. But another thing I would like you to notice is that there is a midrib here. And the midrib is actually lighter in color than what I have here. So what I will do next is take a fine line. This is called a fine liner brush. Now, a fine liner is a brush where the tip is really long. And you use this for very thin lines, a very controlled lines, if I want to call them that way. So I'm just putting some water, and I'm going to just lay the water where I have the midrib. Now you don't see much, but if you can see, if I tilt it against the light, can you maybe see the water? when obviously you don't see the water, but you see the shine of the water. And if you see the shine of the water and not the color, can you see it now? Probably, yes, no? Okay. However, now when you lay the water, I'm actually reactivating the pigment. So what I will do is take a paper towel, lay the paper towel on top of my leaf, and I'm going to take off or remove some of the color or some of the pigment. So I'm lightening up my midrib. So essentially, it's probably the easiest way to get the midrib. Now, it's time to add a second layer, but this time I need to be careful and I will not go over the midrib. So I will try to protect the midrib. So rather than protecting, now I'm going to take some sap green. You don't see it, but in my palette, right here, I have sap green, and I'm mixing sap with my cadmium yellow. Now, the reason why I'm mixing sap and cadmium is that the sap over this leaf is too much. So here I have a very dull color. So I'm actually adding even more water. So here, if you pay careful attention, I'm going to go not over the whole leaf, but just on one side of the midrib. There you go. And I have just added a very, very light, thin wash of green, which I want it to be just dull, just enough to see that there is this green, but it's not that dark. And I'm adjusting here and there. And I do it the same on the other side. So I turn the page, or I turn the leaf. And again, I need to protect my midrib. Or rather than protect it, I need to be careful not to go over my midrib. And there you go. So now again, this is just the first layer of color. Again, I'm mixing sap with cadmium. And I'm intensifying the other side as well. As you can see, I'm just adding another layer on top. Now at this stage, I have my base color, which is the yellow, the cadmium yellow I laid at the base. And then I have little red parts, which are part of the discoloring of the leaf. Now the leaf, when the leaf is in its bush, is rather green, very dark green. But then as autumn comes, it becomes red, and then actually it becomes yellow, then red, and it has this beautiful color we can see here. Okay, now next step. If we look closely, we have a midrib, which is not exactly yellow, but which is right now it's yellow. It's a pale red. So I need to color this midrib pale red. So what I do is take my fine liner. Again, the fine liner is this brush here. Okay. And I'm going to intensify this with dark brown. Actually, I'm taking a sepia right now. Probably the sepia is too dark, but there's always a way to make it lighter. So by going over the midrib and intensifying one side, what I'm doing is creating a shadow. So by creating a shadow, I give the illusion, the 3D illusion, and the midrib is popping out much more. Can you see that? I suppose so. I hope so. Yep. Devi andare via, Samantha? Okay, every so often you hear me talking in Italian because I see some movements behind the screen, so I'm checking what's going on just to make sure everything is okay. Now again, I worked on the midrib, but if I look at my original leaf, there's something here, so it looks like the leaf. It's not only discoloration, but it has broken in parts. So I'm trying to mimic, or I'm trying to replicate what I see here, and I'm adding some sepia. And then here and there, the leaf is kind of broken. So I want to show this by adding these little dark spots. And again, this is just the beginning because it takes quite a while to create a very accurate botanical leaf. So again, I'm just working in places, and every so often I observe my leaf to make sure I'm working well. Now I've taken some alizarin crimson, and I'm going to add to the alizarin crimson some cadmium red. So it's half and half alizarin and half cadmium. And I'm going to go over the edges here. It's kind of hard to see the edges, but they're slightly reddish. So I'm just going to go over with my fine liner. And I'm not going to go all the way down, but every so often I'm going to break this line. And the reason why I break this line is because I want to show that there's some light shining through. So here I need to make this less intense. So I'm going to put just some water. I went over it, oops, a little bit, made a little mistake. We can fix that. Okay. Mistakes are part of the process. Never be afraid of making mistakes because mistakes often occur. So if you make a mistake, just clean it and then go over it with a darker color and you won't see what happened. Anyway, I'm making a mess here. All right, so I was saying that I'm going to remove a little bit of this intense red, but just a little bit. So I just go over it with water. This is just water. And as you can see, I'm bringing along the color with me. By the way, I forgot to mention that I'm using Fabriano paper. Fabriano is an Italian brand, and I'm not saying it's my favorite, but it's paper I work a lot with. And Fabriano is an Italian manufacturer, so that's one of the reasons why I use this paper. But there are other brands as well. So wherever you are in the world, you need to find the paper that best suits what you need to do. Now, by that, I mean it depends on how you like the water to spread and things like that. Now, this is just the very first layer, so you really don't see much. We really need to work along the edges of this other side. So on one side, I'm kind of happy with the result. On the other side, I'm not so happy, which means I'm working on adding red over the edges. Again, in places, not everywhere, so I'm not going along the whole area. And maybe sometimes I could press a little harder with the paintbrush, like in this way. I don't know if you can see it, but by pressing, I have less of a neat line. Maybe add something here. And also maybe I can also add some brown to intensify. I do like contrast a lot, so I tend to add contrasts, and sometimes exaggerate, but that's how I like it. This is a personal matter. I see quite a few people are watching, but nobody's asking questions. So if you have a question, you may ask, especially when there are silent moments when I'm concentrated. Okay. Now, as you can see, I have added some water because in some areas, I'm not sure you can see it, but in some areas, I want the margin of the leaf to be really, really distinct. And sometimes I want the color to spread a little bit more. So I like the pigment to move along the flow of the water. Okay, so let me continue. So I'm going to add a little bit more water in some areas and splatter some color here and there. And I'm going to make a mix with cadmium yellow again. And I'm going to intensify just one side of the leaf. So you can see and compare the left side to the right side and see what's going on. Okay, now it's time for a little bit of spattering. I'm testing the color on various pieces of paper, but I am not happy with what I have. So somebody has handed me a piece of paper, and yes, as you can see, what you do with extra pieces of paper is to find some spot to test the color. And right now, can you see how the water is spreading? But I don't want to intervene too much on this side. Now here I'm working wet in wet, which means everything is spreading evenly. Instead here, the same color is applied wet on dry. And I'm mimicking the spatter you have here. Now, when you spatter color in watercolor and you're doing a landscape, for example, you can use the paintbrush. Let me just show you on a piece of paper. Okay, so let me show you on this scrap paper. If I am, as I said, doing a landscape, you take a hard bristle brush and you do this work and you get a lot of spatters, which mimics what I have on the leaf. But if I do this on my leaf without protection, I will get spatter all over the sheet, which is not desirable. This is the reason why I am just a little cautious, and maybe I will just spatter a little bit, only just being very, very careful. You see that? And I've spattered some here. Next time I will create a kind of stencil to keep my leaf out, but because this is alive, mistakes can happen. Okay, so again, I'm spattering carefully so that I get all these droplets, which I'm now going to show you. I'm not sure it's visible, but all these little droplets mimic what I have on the leaf itself. So if I do this with various colors, so I can do it with a darker color, so a brown, a sepia, or a Van Dyke brown, even different reds, and different types of spatter create different kinds of results. So essentially, let's take a look at this imperfection here. Can you see this one, this imperfection? Now, this imperfection is created with wet on wet. So for example, I have Let's see if this is still wet. Yes. Now this area is still wet, so I can play around with this color. So I'm creating an area where I will just add some darks, which will spread unevenly. I'm not sure you can see that, but probably you can see now. So I'm working on this area here. So the color is spreading nicely, and essentially the water is doing the job for me. I'm not doing that much. So I'm just adding, I'm dabbing droplets of color. So let me just show you better. Let's see. So if I add, can you see probably just droplets here and there? You can see the water is actually playing with my droplets. Now, in this case, this looks more like a star, so it's not so desirable. So I need to play around with this and make a crack or mimic what could be a crack in the leaf itself. So I might imagine a crack there and maybe some other cracks up here. A crack, so the leaf is opening up and breaking up. Now I'm just taking a little bit of blue. You cannot probably see from my palette, but I was taking this blue, which is ultramarine blue. And the reason why I'm taking ultramarine blue is that because I want to intensify my brown. So the way to intensify browns is by adding ultramarine. Ultramarine is my favorite to intensify. Now, as you can see, I'm intensifying the midrib. Is it looking better? Okay, I also want to intensify the breaks or the cracks in the leaf and maybe add some spots here and there. And let me just show you something. Now here, let's say this dirty part is kind of dull, and I want to intensify this part. So all I do is dab exactly on the spot where I have that kind of halo, which I see and I don't see. Now for halo, let me show you exactly what I mean. Let me do it again. So right here, the color is rather dull, okay? So it's a halo, let's say a halo of the problem on the leaf. So I will go over it by dabbing a little bit here and there. And now can you see how I intensified this? So it looks more interesting. And especially if I add even a different color. So I add a little bit of red. See how it changes? So now I'm going to play around with these areas which are red, but I want to intensify the damage I have on the leaf, because the leaf is pretty damaged, but that's why I picked it in the first place. So I'm just enjoying myself with little cracks, intensifying here and there, little droplets. And then I will take care of the veins. So the midrib is the most important part of the leaf. Anybody's got a question? Nobody. So all I'm doing is just dabbing and accentuating what the little problems on the leaf are. But it's also time to do the second part of the midrib. And again, I'm not working all along the line, but accentuating only some of the parts. So again, I'm intensifying just part of the midrib. Okay. Now I'm intensifying some of the parts on the leaf at will. That is, I'm not exactly looking at my prototype. I'm just improvising and deciding how I want this to spread. Okay. As you can see, as I keep moving along, it's becoming more and more interesting. Now let's take a look at these imperfections here. I'm not so happy about because I was really improvising, but it's okay. Mistakes are happy mistakes, always. I'm not sure if anybody knows Bob Ross, who he was. There's a happy little cloud here and there. If you don't know who Bob Ross is, check online and check his videos of the 1970s. He was a very, very good artist who painted mostly landscapes. Well, right now I'm just playing around, but I'm intensifying the color a little bit. So Bob Ross made a video, well, not video, many videos, made a series of videos on landscapes. And whenever he made a mistake, he always found an excuse for making that mistake. It was always a happy little mistake, just like he had happy little clouds in the sky. And I have a happy little leaf. Okay. Now I'm taking more of my alizarin crimson. And I'm playing around with the color. Now, to be honest, I don't know if you can see what I'm doing, but I keep moving because I want to get to the end of this to show you what the end result is. Because I suppose some of you might be rather impatient to see what the end result is. Okay. Every so often, I just take simply water and I wash my paintbrush because I don't want, sometimes I don't want too much color on the leaf. Now, the next thing is I need to dry this. So bear with me because I'm going to use the hair dryer. Okay, so now we have this layer pretty dry. Now it's time to add a little bit more of the veins, which if you see, the secondary veins. So instead of making mistakes, I'd rather just draw them lightly with a pencil first. So more or less, they go this way, this way, this way, more or less. And then they alternate. When I say alternate, I'm not sure if you can see on video, but one vein doesn't start exactly where the other one starts. So I'm alternating them from the midrib. Okay. So next step. What I need to do is use a fine liner, which is always my same old fine liner, and use a color which is not too different from my base color. So I'm using this pale green. I'm not sure on video whether you can see this pale green, but believe me, it's pale green. And I'm just going to go, well, probably a little bit more because I can't see it myself. Okay, so once I do so, I'm going to take some of the color around it, turn around the leaf, and put some more color. Actually, you can't see that much Even in real life, it's not really showing. Sometimes the base is too dark, so all I do is just show that I do have a midrib and the veins. Too dark. So sometimes if you exaggerate, all you do, you take a paper towel and you dab it and eliminate the possible mistake, if there is a mistake. I hope you're enjoying this video or tutorial, whatever you can call it. Not exactly a tutorial, it's more of a demo rather than a tutorial. Okay. Now you may notice that every so often I have to turn around my paintbrush because there is a defect. It's ruined on one side. And so I have to be careful how I'm using it because it's damaged, unfortunately. So if you buy one of these paintbrushes, make sure always to protect the tip because it's something that gets damaged really easily. I'm just intensifying the bottom here so that we can see these midribs, these veins a little better. I'm trying to intensify, but I can see that the color is not what I was expecting. In any case, we'll just go with it. You can barely see it here. Barely see it, that the vein is slightly lighter than the base color of the leaf. So slightly. So it's not really evident. But we'll see what happens with the next one. Not so evident, but it's kind of okay. Okay. Probably here you will see it more because I'm adding more color or more pigment. Okay. Okay, I'm adding sap, by the way, for information. And I'm very careful to leave the space of the veins. Although you may not see it, but I'm actually leaving a little gap between the vein and the midrib. Maybe you can see the difference with one side where I have the veins painted out, or actually in this case I worked negatively by leaving out the veins. And let's do the same thing on the other side. I keep turning the paper simply because it's much easier for me when I control the paintbrush. So I have more control by turning the paper all the time. Even if I understand it's confusing for you, watchers. but it's easier for me when I control, especially when I'm controlling the tip. Okay. Now it's becoming more of a leaf. Sometimes I apply too much pigment, too much color. And so I have to wash it down and remove some. Now, sometimes it's really painful because you really need to work in layers. And when you work with layers, you just have to be careful not to damage the bottom layer. Otherwise, you need to start all over again. Now, you may not notice, but another characteristic is to be careful with the veins. Now, the vein next to the midrib, the vein is thicker, and then it tapers towards the margin of the leaf, which means you also, while you're painting, you have to be careful and do so many things all at the same time. Okay, now it's looking more like a leaf. I forgot the petiole. Here it is. Now I've just noticed it. Without the petiole, it's not exactly a leaf, is it? Okay, I'll just add some shadow. And it looks like a leaf, doesn't it? So, I hope you enjoyed this video. I'm here for any possible questions, and I can show it to you from right here. Yes. And hopefully I'll see you again. If you subscribe to the channel, maybe I'll have more videos, more watercolor videos, and maybe you can follow the same video by watching it again, and you might do it step by step with me next time. Bye-bye, everyone.